Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another session of the Playhouse. I see you've been following it.
Big time. Big time.
So, the person in front of me is firstly a Kenyan, then I'm Zungu. And also
real definition of African American.
Yep. And also has... And the reason why I say that is because that you have been extremely instrumental in shaping the Kenyan music industry and more specifically worship culture in this country.
Oh, that's so cool.
Not just you, but your family as well.
Yeah.
And we're going to have that whole conversation.
Awesome.
You are an amazing musician. You are a superb producer. For those who don't know, you're also a producer, songwriter, worship creative director, and you have been extremely impactful. I'm a fan. Aww. And that's 100% real talk. And that's why I've been stressing you to be on this show and asking you to just send me your music on the side. So I am extremely excited about the conversation that we're about to have.
That's so kind.
I've talked too much, so let's get straight into this. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, put your hands together for none other than Rebekah Dawn. You're the God who won't change. So, question number one.
Yes.
Is it just Rebekah Dawn these days, or is there a few added? Like as a musician, do you go by the name Rebekah Dawn, or has it changed?
Dawn is my middle name, my given middle name. Rebekah Dawn Matheny was my maiden name. And so I just started going by Rebekah Dawn because I never wanted to become known by my father's name. And then when I get married, it's hard to now for people to know my husband's name. And I keep being called by my dad's name. So I just thought, let me go with my first and second name. So even when I get married, it's still my name. I'm all good. Yeah. So it's Rebekah Dawn. Okay.
So ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Rebekah Dawn.
Yo, AKA.
First time that I've done intros twice, man. That's how special you is.
That's funny.
Okay, let me just, honestly speaking, you've done amazing things. And I'm really excited about this interview. There's so much music that you have. We definitely can't get through it all, but we'll try and cover a lot of it. So the first question that I usually like asking people is, when did you fall in love with music?
Definitely as a child, and definitely through my parents. Both my mom and my dad are wonderful singers. My dad plays guitar, my mom plays piano. And I fell in love with music through being in church with them. They would lead praise and worship and sing. They were great lovers of music. They had music playing in our house all the time. So it was just an atmosphere that I grew up in. I was that kid who was forced to take music lessons as a kid. So yeah, I definitely started loving music as a child through them and their influence.
Okay, let's do something that I've rarely done on the Playhouse, which is get the history of you coming to Africa, your parents coming to Africa, the impact that they've had, and let's start from that beginning. Tell us a little bit about the genesis of you guys coming to Kenya.
Okay, so my grandfather on my dad's side, my dad's dad, came to Kenya in 1969. He was an itinerant missionary, so he traveled all over the world. And when he came to Kenya, he almost on landing, he just fell in love with Kenya and stayed here and ministered here until he passed away. So that was in 1969. My dad was 16 years old when he first came to Kenya, and he came with my grandfather and his whole family. They would travel around schools, high schools, and do high school ministry, like the original K crew kind of thing. So they would all travel around high schools. They all sang. My dad's family, all of them sang, all of my dad and his siblings. So they would go around, sing, play guitar, and do all of that. And then my granddad, one of his biggest passions was to train pastors, to raise up, local church and local pastors and invest in that. So sadly, he actually passed away in Western. He was at I'm pretty sure he was at a conference, and he got malaria, turned into cerebral malaria, and ended up passing away. And so my grandmother actually carried on his vision. She stayed in Kenya. She and my dad stayed in Kenya. My dad came to plant the church, which originally he was going to plant with my grandfather, and before he passed. So my dad planted the church. My grandmother started.
And the church in this case being
is Nairobi Lighthouse Church.
Yep. And when was this planted?
So the NLC was planted in 1987. Yeah, in March 1987. And then my grandmother built Clarence Matheny Ministries, which is now Clarence Matheny Leadership Training Institute. And she spent the remainder of her life building up a facility for training pastors, conferences, and things like that. So she was here, and then my dad was here. Of course, my dad met my mom here. My mom came out on a missions trip. In fact, my grandfather had gone back to the States and was traveling around some churches in the States and was like, hey, if anyone, just feels a call to come and work with us and the work we're doing in Kenya, like, let's go. So my mom, and that's a whole story in itself, but my mom ended up being on the team. So my granddad actually took a picture of the team and sent it. And when my dad saw the photo of that team, he went to his mom, my grandmother, and pointed to my mom, who he'd never met, and said, I'm going to marry that girl. That's my wife. And so my mom came out to Kenya also as a teenager, and just fell in love with Kenya, fell in love with the people, fell in love with the nation, and met my dad. I don't know how, because my father was not the most good-looking man. We always give him a hard time, but fell in love with my dad. They went back to the States to do Bible college and then came out here. And so my dad was actually a pilot, a missionary pilot to the islands off the coast of Kenya, the Islamic islands, Lamu, Pate Island.
Whoa.
He spent years flying. He had a little tiny plane, and he would fly and spend weeks on end, and he would just travel around. He would show the Jesus film. He would preach, witness to, Lamu is where the imams are trained, is on that island. And so he, and Pate Island. And so he did that for years. And eventually, that's what led him to planting the church, is because there was such a burden for not being dependent on the missionary, as it were, to have Kenyans rise up and be able to do all that kind of thing. So both my parents had a very big passion to plant a local church. And so in 1987, they planted the church with 9 adults and 13 children. And I, being one of them, I am a founding member of Nairobi Lighthouse Church. I was 3.5 years old when they planted the church. And and that's what they've been doing since then.
Okay, so how many siblings are you? Are you the firstborn, and what number are you in that?
I'm the third born. We're 6 of us, 5 girls and 1 boy. So I'm number 3. And we're all spread all over the globe, doing all manner of different things. It's fun. So I have 1 sibling here. My younger sister Anna is here, and she is married to a wonderful guy, Faita, and they lead the high school ministry in our church. And then Anna's also like our head, like graphic designer and very involved in our media team. So she and I are here, and my parents obviously are still here.
Yeah.
And then my other siblings are spread across the States, doing all manner of different things.
So you're right when you say you're from your family, you're third generation Kenyans in terms of
being here. Yes. Yeah. In fact, when we were growing up, we never really saw ourselves. I have never seen myself as a missionary. Kenya is home. Like, we were not the family that grew up going back to the States every year and, going on furlough. That was not our life. This was home. I went to the States twice that I have memory of as a child. And then I went for my senior year of high school. So it wasn't ever the States is home and we're here doing the work of the Lord. It was never that way. It was, this is home. This is where we live. We've grown up.
This is what we know.
This is what we know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was always that weird third culture. It's like, I am white and I obviously have a American accent from my parents. But I never have lived in America, other than when I was a senior in high school. I went to the States, and the reason is because my parents were very committed to, they knew that God called them to be here, but they never wanted us to be here as a matter of, they wanted God to call us as well. Like, if you're going to be in Kenya, let it be.
Make your own choice.
Make your own choice. So they wanted us to be able to go back to the States because that is where my family's from, to meet Americans, to go to
experience
school,
home.
to just experience.
Yeah.
And then if we come back, it's not because this was all I had. It's because this is truly where I feel God wants me to be, or wherever in the world we go, whether that's the States, China, wherever. It's just like, where is God calling you to be? That's where you need to go. So, yeah. So I went to the States. I was in Dallas, Texas.
Okay. So let's even rewind that story a bit. First of all, Yanni, that history is amazing. Thank you so much for opening up our minds to that, and even enabling us to see all that your parents have done in terms of spreading the gospel.
Yeah.
You get what I mean?
And spreading music. My parents were very involved in music. Both my mom and dad recorded 2 albums in the 70s and 80s in Kenya.
2 albums?
Yes. In fact, I'm going to have to refer here, so you might have to cut this out.
But no, we're not cutting nothing out. Just refer.
Let me just look at these details, because I thought this was so cool. Yeah, so they recorded 2 albums on cassette tapes at Christ is the Answer Ministries. They had a studio there called Evangel Studios. So that's where I recorded 2 albums. Their first album was called Spread a Little Love Around, and their second album was called He's Alive. Can you believe that?
That is so cool.
Yeah, and they were on TV. They would do like live music on TV. My dad's family as well would do like music specials on, what was that one TV channel?
KBC, then VOK, then it went back to,
things like, so they were there, and it was, my dad has so many cool stories about those days. So they were very involved also in the music production, recording history as well in Kenya, and being involved in that time, and writing songs and writing their own songs. It's very cool for me to look at those cassette tapes. They even have my dad's family has vinyl records that they recorded. It's very cool.
That is too cool to know.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's start a bit of your childhood now. You've painted an amazing foundation for us to see how it is that you ended up here, why it is that I'm calling you Kenyan first.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about you. Where did you go to school?
Okay, so myself and my younger sister are the only 2 out of my whole family that were not born here. We were both born in the States when my parents were traveling. This is before they had planted the church, when my dad was still a pilot. And so I was born in Centerville, Mississippi. I was the only white baby in the hospital. Hallelujah. God was getting me situated from the very get-go. But then my family came back to Kenya when I was, I don't know, less than a year old, and I've been here since. So, yeah, so my other sisters were born in either Nairobi or Mombasa. So I went to Roslyn Academy for the first, from kindergarten through 5th grade or 6th grade, I can't remember, one of those.
And this is early 80s.
This is 90s.
90s,
yeah, I was in Roslyn in the 90s.
It's a bit rude for a guy to ask a lady's age.
Not go there.
Okay, we're not going there, guys.
We don't need to put numbers to everything, okay? So I went to Roslyn. We all did. All my siblings and I did. Between my fourth sister and my fifth sister, there's a 10-year gap. So there was the four of us for a long time. So the four of us were in Roslyn, and then when I was in either fifth or sixth grade, I can't remember, my parents pulled us all out of Roslyn Academy and we started homeschooling. And the reason behind that was just they really wanted us to be able to connect with our youth group and everything, because Roslyn is on the American school system, and most Kenyan schools are in a Kenyan school system, a British school system rather. And so our summer holidays, a lot of Kenyans are still in school, or vice versa, whatever the case may be. And so my parents started seeing, as our youth group started getting going and growing, they didn't want us to be unable to be immersed
detached.
Detached, because we're busy doing school things. And so missions trips, all that kind of stuff, they wanted us to be able to fully be involved, and I'm so grateful that they thought ahead that way. So we started homeschooling so we could be able to control our school schedule. So I homeschooled from 7th or 8th grade, whatever it was, until I finished high school. And
then I hear you, so after you finish high school, okay, first of all, at this time, are you doing anything musical? Are you?
Oh yeah. So I joined our youth group band when I can't remember, I was 13 or 14. And my mom actually, so I took piano lessons from, I think I was 5 when I started doing like classical piano. But my mom was the pianist in our church. And so she was the one who really taught me how, because in school I was learning how to like read sheet music and play classical. So my mom taught me how to play chords and, church music. And so they bought me my first keyboard. It was a tiny little Casio keyboard for Christmas one year. I'll never forget that Christmas. And so they bought me this keyboard, and I started learning how to play chords. And it was those keyboards that, you can like play drums and horns. And I just thought I was a big deal. Like, I just thought I was all that. So I would practice, I would play for hours. I was super into it. And so my mom taught me how to play chords. And so our youth pastor decided to put together a youth worship team and put me on the band. And I'll never forget the first service I ever played with our band. I froze, and instead of playing chords, I just played with one finger. I just played notes along the piano. So I joined when I was, 13 or 14, and then the youth band youth worship team was assimilated with the main church worship team. So I was a main church, I was a BV and alto for,
So you started singing earlier?
Yeah, quite early. Although I was really not good. I have to be honest, and so this isn't me trying to be false humility. I really am not. I was never naturally a good musician. I have partial deafness in one ear. So.
And is that from birth?
That's from when I was really, really young. I had an infant. I don't remember. I had an ear infection, but my parents didn't know that's what it was. And so by the time they figured it out, it had damaged my eardrum on my left ear. So it's all I've ever known. I didn't even know until one day in school, they had these hearing doctors come and give all of us a hearing test, and I failed it. And this was like in 4th or 5th grade. So I'm like,
what do you mean?
I guess I'm deaf. And like, I wasn't aware until then. I didn't have anything to compare it to.
I fully understand. Yeah.
So I forgot what we were talking about. What was the question?
Okay, so let me ask, what are you listening to now? What kind of music? What's the kind of influence that is? What kind of music are you listening to?
At this age?
Yes.
Oh, totally. Integrity, Maranatha, like that. I mean, my dad had every single Integrity and Maranatha cassette tape there was. So growing up, that's what I listened to. I loved Don Moen, loved that kind of music. And then as I joined the youth band, this is when Kirk Franklin, Stomp, this is when it really was a big thing. And I just was blown away by Take 6, Fred Hammond. I really didn't get exposed to local music until I was in my mid-teens, and that came through youth groups. That came through now going to high schools and getting, local guys to come in now, do music and all that kind of stuff, which I loved and totally got into. But yeah, growing up, it was very much Integrity, Maranatha, that kind of Brooklyn Tabernacle, that kind of, what are these country people's names? The Gaither Vocal Band. My goodness.
That's why the hubby's there.
Yes.
To just remind you. Okay, let me ask her, have you given your life to Christ?
Yes. Yeah, for sure. I gave my life to Christ as a very young girl. I gave my life to Christ many times as a young girl because you're the pastor's kid, you answer the altar calls. It was cool. It was like, let me go answer the altar call. But my mom was always like, hey, one of these times it's going to stick. So I was really, really young. I gave my life to the Lord when I was about 6 years old.
Whoa.
Got water baptized and all that when I was around 7 or 8.
And when you say that, you understood the decision that you were making?
Fully understood.
Okay, yeah. That's cool. I've got two
Love
girls.
Jesus.
At 6 years old, you understood what it was that you're saying.
In fact, in our church, before you're water baptized, you have to be able to give your testimony. You can't just go get dunked in the water and get baptized. Like, you have to be able to explain why you're getting baptized. And so I remember sitting down with my mom, because we were having a baptismal. It had been announced in church. It's coming up if you desire to be baptized. And I went and told my mom I want to be baptized. And she was like, well, why? And so I had to be able to verbalize it to her because I've accepted the Lord as my Savior, and this is my outward demonstration of the inward change. Like, I fully understood what was going on. And I grew up loving the Lord. I grew up loving the Lord and loving church. I'm so blessed. 100% of my love for God and the church points back to my parents. I first met Jesus in my dad. That's when I recognized him. That's how I was able to recognize Christ. I'd already seen him through my father. And I think because my parents had such a healthy balance of my dad used to always say, both my mom and my dad used to always say, family before ministry. So I never felt like ministry took my parents away. I never grew up with that kind of, being a
gap. You didn't feel the hole.
I never felt it. Ever.
The vacuum.
Never. I loved Jesus and I loved church. Loved it. Like it was the highlight of my week. I did not love weddings though, because at that time my dad was the only one who had the license to do weddings, which meant we have to go to every single wedding there ever was in our church. I did not love weddings at all, but I loved church, loved it. And my parents were the worship leaders. So my dad would have his guitar. My mom would be over there on the piano. They'd sing. I loved it. I loved praise and worship in our church services. Man, I loved it.
I can feel it.
Yes.
Okay, so let me ask you now. So I hear you homeschooling, and then after homeschooling, what happens?
So I went to the States to do my senior year of school. I still homeschooled it, but I did it in the States.
So you still did it as homeschool?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the church I was actually in my uncle's church for a year in Dallas, Texas. I interned as well at the church. I interned with the I don't want to say interned. I helped. I helped in the youth ministry. I helped in the worship department.
And this is the first time that you are consciously going to States for a living period.
Yes. Yeah.
How old are you now?
I was 16.
Okay.
Yeah. The other times I'd gone to the States had been for maybe 3 weeks as just visits. We'd go. I don't have a lot of memories of traveling in the States before now I went as a senior in high school. I went to the States. I worked in the church, and I went from, by this time, our church was in City Stadium at that time. So it's thousands of black people. And then I go to Dallas and I'm in a church of 300 white people. So it was a huge church culture adjustment for me, like a very just different church culture. It was great. I loved it. I had a great year. The worship leader who I worked under in the States, I loved him so much. He made such an impact on my life, and his style was so different. Because by this time now, I'd been on the worship team for a few months as an alto, a few years by this time when I went to the States, a couple of years, and I played piano a little bit here and there. For sure, I was our youth. I was our youth choir director by the time I went to the States. I was very involved in the worship ministry at our church, whether in youth or main. And so obviously, we've got thousands of people in City Stadium. I mean, we'd have this fire praise and worship. We'd sing a lot of Swahili praise and worship. And I mean, Kenyans, like nobody can praise like Kenyans. Maybe Nigerians, but nobody can praise like Kenyans.
South Africans, Zimbabweans.
Oh yeah, it's true.
And we're going to talk about that because I know you're in
it's true. Yeah. Okay, Africans. Yeah. Nobody can praise like Africans.
Yeah, Africans.
So it was just a huge church culture shock, to now go to a church that, I mean, love for the Lord is undeniable, but their style was so much more reserved. And it just opened me to a whole new style that I equally loved. It was really beautiful, and I loved it. It was a great year. So I finished high school. I graduated high school. I finished my high school, and then I loved my year in Dallas, but I knew even before I went to the States, I knew I was going to come back to Kenya. I think the wisdom my parents had was, test that. Go and see all the shiny things America has to offer, and still do you want to come back? So by the time the year was done, I loved my year. It was great. I had great experiences. There are things about the States I really love. Restaurants being the highest on the list, certain restaurants. But I knew even by the time it was done, I was like, I'm going home for sure. I'm going home. So I came back to Kenya.
Let me ask you, there's something that you've said that I sort of want to poke more into. So by the time you're talking about coming back, do you also have a direction in life where you're saying purpose, where you're like, this is what I want to do with my life at this stage?
It's a good question. Actually, it was while I was in the States. I really was, I was torn because I think all up to that point, I had been serving in our music and ministry and worship ministry because that's what was needed. There was a need for a piano player. There was a need for singers to join, the BV section. And I was happy to do it. Like, I loved it. It's great. It's not because I didn't have a lot of skill that I was bringing. I was good enough to not be a distraction. Let's put it this way. Like, I'm not awesome, but I'm also not like singing off key and just making a mess of things and now creating a distraction. So I loved it, but I never at any point felt like I am called to be a worship leader. Never. It was just, here's what's neat. All in that time I was on the worship, I was also an usher. I was on our sign language team. I would do translation for our deaf congregation for praise and worship. I was a small group leader. I was on our missions department. I was on our prisons ministry. Like, I did everything.
Submerged yourself into church.
Yes, I loved it. I was like, whatever's happening, put me in the middle of it. Especially like doing the admin side of it, the planning, the details. I loved that. So worship was definitely in that mix. I definitely loved it, but it wasn't like, this is it. This is what Oh, not at all. But when I was in the States, I had a moment where I was kind of like, school's wrapping up. I need to be thinking about college, or what am I going to do? Am I going to get married? Who's going to marry me? I just all those things are going through your head. Like, what am I going to do? And I'll never forget, I was sitting in my cousin's house, and I was alone. I was in the living room, and I was just kind of having this inside talk with the Lord of just, what do you want me to do, God? Where do you want me to go? I mean, I know I'm going to go back to Kenya, but to do what? What do you want me to do? One of the things that my parents have been very intentional about, and I'm so grateful for, is that nothing was ever really handed to us by virtue of being the senior pastor's kids. It's, you got to prove yourself faithful, trustworthy, available for any position the way anyone else would. It's not, oh, hey, you're the pastor's kid, you pick which ministry, we'll put you there. It's like, you got to put in the hard work, probably a little more because the others, because
you can't look like your favoritism.
Exactly. And I'm so grateful for that. That afternoon I was sitting on this sofa, and I'm just kind of having this internal discussion with the Lord and praying and just, Father, what do you want me to do? Where do you want me to go? And at the time there was a Joyce Meyer program on TV, and I had muted it, so I wasn't hearing anything. And I don't know what she was, I don't know what was going on in the program because I wasn't paying attention to it, but they were doing some sort of reel. It was a long time ago. I was just turned 17 at this time. I think it was, they were doing a recap of like their feeding programs they have all over the world. So that you'd see like these little Indonesian kids, and then these little, Caucasian kids. And then you'd see these African kids, and then you'd go back to Indian kids and then African kids. And every time these African faces would come up on the screen, my heart would jump, like something would just move in my heart. And when I was watching this thing, it was still muted, and I was looking at it, and that's when I just felt this phrase, I know that sounds weird to say I felt a phrase, but I did. I felt it. And it was just teach the nations to worship, because I am so passionate about teaching. I'm passionate about the word. So passionate about the word. And so I was kind of tossing up between, do I want to be like a Bible teacher, maybe a Bible college teacher, something along those lines. And so that's kind of what I was playing with on, do I want to go in that direction? Do I want to get trained in teaching? Do I want to do some sort of theology course or Bible college course, something like that? And so when I saw these little African faces that would just, my spirit would jump. That's what I felt the Lord put in my heart is, I want you to teach nations to worship. So when I came home after my senior year, even though I knew that's what I was called to do, it didn't necessarily have a plan around it. It was just...
It's like the vision, the bigger picture.
Yeah. So I came home,
Let me just even ask before we'll continue from you came home. This is why the Playhouse sometimes takes 4 hours, because there's so many questions.
There are rabbit trails.
So many questions just keep coming into the mind. I've never thought of this question from this perspective. That's because I've never interviewed somebody who's from a different race. Now I'm thinking about an American or a Westerner watching you right now. How would you explain what worship, how you experienced African worship for the first time? Are you getting what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Because you talked about being in you talked about the different styles of worship.
Yeah.
How would you just even to Kenyans, how would you tell us about African worship from the Lighthouse perspective back in the days? Because you're talking about singing in Swahili.
Yeah.
You've sung songs in Swahili.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to show people that you started doing this even before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, an African worship experience, well, again, it's until I went to the States, I had nothing to compare it to. So it was, other than the Maranatha tapes that we would listen to. So it's Maranatha and church on Sunday. And again, my parents were very intentional. Even though we did a lot of Swahili praise and worship, they were considered very cutting edge when it comes to praise and worship in churches back in the day, because they introduced a lot of international songs. They would translate a lot of international songs or Don Moen songs into Swahili. So, there was a lot of, I would say that's what I grew up hearing a lot of.
That's so cool.
There's a lot of cutting edge.
Yeah.
So we would do the Baraka za Mungu, but we would also do Shout to the Lord. And, and those kinds of, or even further back when we were in Intercontinental Hotel, I remember singing you name a Don Moen song. That's what we would do in praise and worship.
Yeah.
Or a lot of the Maranatha integrity songs. So...
And you translate them. That's what I'm hearing you saying.
We translate them or we do them in English. We do both. When we moved to City Stadium, we started having an English service and a Swahili service, because our Swahili only speaking congregation was quite large. So it merited having a Swahili only service, because they couldn't really connect as well in the English services. So, yeah.
I had you even talk about translator. So in this time, would your dad use a translator?
Yeah, my dad would translate. Guys on his team would translate. Guys in his worship team would help him translate. My dad spoke Swahili fluently because of traveling around Lamu and Pate and all of that kind of stuff. So he would take a lot of the songs. And again, this is where a lot of the musicianship, I didn't know it then, but these seeds were being sown in not just translating, but translating in a way that has good cadence and rhythm, and finding words that fit the melody, because not everything in English, when
translated,
translated well, or even if direct translation worked, sometimes musically it didn't feel right. So it was, what words can we find that still capture the thought that's being communicated, but works better musically in a Swahili in the Swahili language. And so, they were very big into doing that.
That's so powerful, because that's what you've done now with some of your biggest hits. You've taken that, applied that same principle. Maybe not a song written by somebody else, but maybe you think in English, but how do I...
It's exactly, you've said it exactly, because I think in English. I don't think in Swahili. But I find, this is part of my school story as well. My mother, when we started homeschooling, we had to have a language credit, and my mother insisted it will be Swahili. You're not going to live here and not know how to speak Swahili. And again, moving from the Roslyn Academy crowd, which was primarily at that point missionaries, NGO, is primarily white people. So of course our jokes are in English, everything's in English.
But I also like Roslyn. My two sisters went to Roslyn, and the reason why my parents put them there was because of the Christian foundation of the school.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
It wasn't just that your parents put you in any American school.
For
they didn't put you in ISK.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So we were there with a great Christian community, great chapel services, all that kind of stuff. But what we realized when we left Roslyn and started really integrating with our youth group is we didn't get any of the jokes, because jokes in Sheng are not funny in English. And then you kept feeling bad for, guys would say something, they'd laugh and they're like, what did you say? What did you say? And it's like, okay, instead of asking everyone to translate for me, let me just learn how to speak this language so I can really integrate and really be involved. And this is my home. And I'm so grateful my mom valued that. So she put us in Swahili lessons. I'll never forget Bwana Evans. Bwana Evans was my Swahili teacher. And I did Swahili for 6 hours a week for 6 months. And my final exam, this is like Swahili Sanifu, like proper Swahili. And my final exam, I had a written exam and an oral exam. My written exam was that I had to explain the Trinity. In Swahili Sanifu, I had to write, I don't remember, it was something like 300-400 words. And then my oral exam was, he took us to the city market opposite Aga Khan Hospital. And I had a list of items that I had to find, barter, and buy. And then I had 3 stories I had to tell: where I was born, how I got saved, and what was my third story? I can't remember.
That is so cool.
And he was standing next to me the whole time, grading my Swahili as I'm speaking now. So it was very intense. So once Swahili lessons were ended, then it was all corrupted by Sheng, because then all that nice Swahili went out the window, and But I'm so grateful because it did help me connect, like truly connect. And again, I'm just so, I think speaking the language helps you not be disconnected. So I loved that. And even now as I write, because I prefer to write in Swahili, I prefer most songs in Swahili. I find Swahili a very beautiful language. I think English, because it has more words, is more descriptive, but I still think some thoughts are more beautiful in Swahili than they are in English. I don't know, nakutamani. It's heavier than I desire. There's something more. I like thoughts in Swahili a lot. I prefer them more often in Swahili than I do in English. So those seeds.
That's so cool. You've explained, so deeply why it is that then you write songs in Swahili for more than just connection with other people.
Oh no, I love the language. It's mostly because I love the language. It's not just, if I write Swahili songs, then Swahili people will connect with me. I love this language. I think it's beautiful.
And some things are even actually better expressed in Swahili.
Oh yeah, totally.
Somebody who per se only speaks in Swahili or writes only in Swahili may not have that thought process. I also love the fact that you've said that understanding the language helps you connect. And this is why I agree with you. If nobody knows who you are, Rebekah, and you just randomly meet a stranger, there's somebody who doesn't know you from music or anything, there's a way that you'd connect more than with somebody who's straight out of America and connecting. So for embracing yourself into the culture, I get that. Okay, let's continue with this 7-hour conversation.
Come on. It's good.
This is why we take time, people. So you come home. You finished your senior year. I'm thinking that to be like A levels,
I don't know.
Or like O levels. Okay, like O levels. Anyway, you finish your senior year, then you come back home. And with sort of direction of purpose. Maybe not the exact steps on how to attain it, but there's a destination. Or there's a goal that we're looking at. Continue with the story.
So I come home. By this time, I'm also very exposed and in love with a lot of our local music. Pete Odera, I was at his first ever album recording in Grand Regency Hotel. Milele brought fire to the, to the Swahili and Kenyan music that was so fresh and new. Gospel Fathers, oh my gosh, like all those guys. And we were very much involved with K Crew, Mose, Jagoosh. We used to do all this itinerating of schools with them. Extreme Weekend, we were very involved with them. So Extreme Weekend.
Tell us a little bit about Extreme. So you can't jump over Extreme Weekend.
Yes.
It's a big deal.
It's true. So Extreme Weekend is a weekend that our youth group from our church put on. And we had 3 of them. Our first Extreme, man, I wish I could remember the dates and all that. I'm getting old, Richie. Okay.
No, don't worry, we're many.
Our first one we had as our guest artist, as our headliner artist, we had Limit X.
The huge African ground-shaking pop group.
Yes.
Yes. Gospel pop group.
Yes, we had them. We had some guys from the States who I don't remember. And it was at Kasarani Gymnasium. And that was our first one. Our second one, we had Chevelle Franklin as our headlining artist. And then our third one was Kirk Franklin.
Yeah.
And that one was in, it was also in, where was Kirk Franklin? It was in the yes, it was in the stadium.
No, it was at Bomas of Kenya.
That was the VIP show.
Yeah.
It was at Bomas. And then the main one was in now the Gymnasium. Although it was supposed to be in Nyayo Stadium.
Yep.
And then the government kicked us out a month before. So we had to move the whole thing.
So, okay. Just a little backstory about Extreme Weekend. Why did you even start doing it? Before that, you're telling me you're touring with, because Mose, I just interviewed Mose, and Mose said he spent like a year in Light T as a member of Light T.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I didn't even know that.
I didn't either.
So, but what you're trying to say is you were doing a lot of high school missions.
Yeah. So we did tons of high school missions together with Mose and Jagoosh. I mean, countless, so many. And then Extreme Weekend was really, more than anything, it was meant to be a harvest event, just something to now throw the net and bring in the harvest, bring in the fish, as it were. So we went around to high school after high school. We had teams go out to so many high schools to give them tickets, and it was free. I think gosh, Richie, I can't remember the details. Okay. And I admin all these events, and I still can't remember. Yeah, so the point was to bring in high school students, teenagers, young adults, and just have a crazy weekend to make people fall in love with Jesus, accept Jesus, get to know Jesus, connect with the church, a big harvest event. And so it was awesome. So the first Extreme Weekend, I was I directed our youth choir. Our second Extreme Weekend, I was more involved I still did some music stuff, but I was much more involved now on the admin side of things, making the event come together. And then our third with Kirk Franklin, now I was fully like on the admin side of it, doing everything you can imagine, all the detail work and
I
budget
remember
stuff and all that stuff. Yeah.
And also the checklist of musicians to come through.
Although I wasn't super involved in that aspect.
Can we talk about that? Because at that time I didn't appreciate it, to be honest. But now seeing where the gospel industry has gone to, I'm like, thank you for what you did. Because I remember even we had to come and audition. I'm like, we're hip hop. We love Jesus.
Just give us a mic and a stage.
And
What's
then
the
I'm
problem?
like, we're a live band. Like, I remember when you came for one of our gigs at Parklands, the law school. But explain to people who may not understand why you had to do sort of a rigorous training before people jumped onto the platform to perform. Yeah.
So first of all, we were really passionate in having local ministers and artists. One of the things that we just had noticed is there tended to be a lot of excellence given when outsiders would come in, and the same standard wasn't really met when you have local artists who you're connecting with. It's like the outsiders are the big shots, they get really great treatment, and then the other ones are like, I use your mic, go do your thing. And so we really wanted to make sure that, there's an equal value, but with that also comes equal responsibility. And so, we had all of the artists who desired to be involved, especially with Kirk's, because Kirk was a huge, well-known name. Everyone wants to be on Kirk's stage. Everyone wants to say, I opened for Kirk. And so we had auditions for any artist who wanted to be involved. And I think there are many reasons why. One of the reasons was for us to also get to know new people, because it's kind of like there's this very small group of well-known, these are the artists everyone knows. But there might be someone else who's amazing and you just don't know about them. So that was one reason. But the bigger reason was to, I guess, maybe,
check your heart.
Yeah, I might have to say this a couple of times before it comes out right. But yeah, it was to see what attitude comes out of people when you ask them to audition. Because some people are like, me, audition? Do you know who I am? And it's like just that attitude. It's not really the attitude we're excited about. I mean, this is ministry. As much as this is Kirk Franklin, this is ministry. And the heart matters. The heart really, really matters in ministry. And so, yeah, it was good to just kind of do a heart check on people and just see, are they easy to work with? Are they easy to flow with? Check content, what's being said, because you're coming under the umbrella of Nairobi Lighthouse Church. If you're on this stage, that means we approve of you. So we want to make sure what you're singing, how you're singing.
Do you even know how to hold the microphone?
Exactly.
Performance-wise?
We weren't huge fans of lip syncing, which was a huge predominant style at that time. Was to just have the DJ play your track as is, and then you just kind of, over it. And it's like, we don't want that. We want it to be authentic, live, sing, like, do your thing. So it was an opportunity for
excellence
and helping, coaching where we can, giving feedback. It was awesome. The guys we ended up working with were just awesome, easy to work with. Again, for Kirk's Extreme Weekend.
And let's also make this clear. We're not just talking about upcoming people who came to audition.
Oh yeah.
Everybody came to audition. Anybody who was going to be on that stage.
Yeah.
Which I later came to really. We didn't come on, I remember, because we wanted to go live band.
Yeah.
And there's something about you can't touch Kirk's live sets.
Yes, his
and
guys
everything.
were very adamant.
Looking at where the industry, I keep calling it a gospel industry because that's the term, but though it's gospel ministry and all that. Yeah. Looking at where it is now, some of those things need to, actually not some, all of what you did back then would really help in checklisting before people get onto stage and not just using people for their gifts as well.
Exactly. And I think at that time, because we knew Kirk's name is going to draw and everyone's going to want to be involved. And a lot of these people aren't people we have relationship with. So we don't really know them. We don't know you. But that doesn't mean we don't want you to have this opportunity. So auditions was a way for us to get to know you, to see how can we help you? Is this the right fit? Is this the right stage? Are you comfortable being on this stage? It was also our first time to work with an international artist of such caliber. I mean, we'd worked with Chev. She'd done live band, fully live, the previous, the Extreme we had done before, which was awesome. But I mean, Kirk Franklin, it's like anybody knew who Kirk Franklin was. And so even for us, like his tech writer, his team, all of that stuff, it was just on another level. And that's one of the things they had specified is nobody can touch Kirk's equipment. Once it's on stage, it's been sound checked, it's been proved. And this is again before things like roadies and
this is 2007 or almost about 2008. I remember.
Yeah. So all of this stuff was very, before then gigs would just be like, here's drums, here's a keyboard, here's a bass. This group comes, does it, leaves. The next group uses the same things. And so even for us, just realizing, wow, this standard is very different. So working with that, but also trying to enable our local guys and all that kind of stuff. There was a lot of learning. There were big learning curves, for us. And it was great. We loved it. Kirk was awesome. His team was awesome. Talking to them via email, they were not awesome. They were super demanding, I would almost say unkind. But when they landed, I was stunned because I was the one who did a lot of the communication, with his security guys and his sound guys and all this kind of stuff. And, you're just kind of like, wow, I hope we're going to gel well when they land. But when they landed, even his managers, I mean, just the nicest people. And I remember I had a conversation with one of them one time, and I just told him, I was like, now that I've gotten to know you, you're quite nice, but you don't come across that way at all in your communication. And it was actually really sad because he was like, Rebekah, I have to be that way, especially with people we don't know, because we've been to places where we're kept in like, run down hostels. And it's not that we're not humble. This is how he explained the problem. And I thought it was brilliant. He said, for Kirk, my job is to make sure he can function at 100%. That means he can't have a running stomach. He can't have slept on a bed that now he's sore. People are expecting him to jump off of speakers and shout and scream for an hour and a half. That's very physically demanding. It's also spiritually demanding. He's pouring out not just physically, but from his heart and from his spirit. And so he said, we've just been too many places where he's kept somewhere, the food doesn't agree with him, and the next day he goes to perform, he's sick, he's unwell, he's exhausted, he didn't sleep well, they were put right next to a bar, and so there's music all night. And then when he gets on stage and doesn't do well, people will now start saying, this guy's a studio musician, he's not a good live musician, and it's like, he is live, it's just, he was uncomfortable or not handled well. So it ended up being awesome. Like, we loved his team, loved them, they were great. It was a great experience. So yeah,
and a learning experience for you.
Big time.
Huge, putting up that kind of event.
Yeah, big time. And again, it's those things, it's just amazing how God weaves people's stories, because even at that time, I wasn't really thinking about, well, one day I'm going to be in production, or I'm going to have my own manager, or I'm going to be the one invited to go places and do things. And I'm not even thinking that way at this point. I'm just thinking, hey, let's get all the youth of Nairobi saved. Let's do it through Kirk Franklin. And so it was just so cool to be exposed to such a high caliber of excellence and the way things are done. And it's just so much to learn. It was awesome. It was really, really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So by that point though.
So let's flash back. Okay.
Yes.
Let's go back now. I like the jumping. You see, you've got your own style of how you're doing the Playhouse.
Yeah, it's true. I'm sorry. Cause man, that was 2007. We're going back to 2003 because that's when I went to Hillsong. So when I came home from high school, I was home for about a year, and I think maybe less. And in that time, I'm just kind of, again, I've reconnected in the church, I'm serving, but kind of thinking about what's my next, in this Teach the Nations to Worship, what do I need to do? And so this is also at the time Hillsong was really kind of taking over the worship scene in the world. And I loved their music, loved Darlene, loved all their songwriters. So the guy who I was really, really drawn to in the whole Hillsong group was Reuben Morgan, one of their main songwriters. I just loved him. And so one day I was online and I'd heard about Hillsong College. And so I went online and I read a little bit about it. And so I wrote my parents, I was like, what do y'all think about, me going to Australia and doing, they have a Bible college and then you pick a stream. So everyone does kind of like the core Bible college stuff. And then you pick a stream, whether that's youth ministry, kids ministry, worship ministry. So yeah, my parents decided, cool, let's do it. So I packed up my bags and flew halfway across the world and I went to Australia.